Hello and welcome to the Fostering Success Michigan Life Domains webinar series. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Maddy Day and I am the Director of Outreach and Training with the Center for Fostering Success at Western Michigan University. Before we get started, a few housekeeping things to keep in mind. Attendees are in listen-only mode. We will have an opportunity for questions at the end. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact the Citrix team at the number you see on your screen. The recording will be available following the webinar in our resource library on our website. One other thing to note is that we do have a handout today. We have several handouts. They're available in the sidebar. You can see those. Those handouts will be mentioned as we go throughout this webinar, but just want to let you know that you can download them directly there. I'd like to say a special thank you to our funders, the Kresge Foundation, the Havermill Foundation, and Western Michigan University for their continued support of the Fostering Success Michigan statewide initiative. And now I would like to extend a very special welcome to Brandon Youngblood, our FSM Student Ambassador. Hey, Brandon.
Hello.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brandon. You will hear a little bit more from Brandon a little bit later on. Brandon is joining me today to provide some insight, some perspective, and then give a little kind of PSA to everybody out there about the Student Union, which he mentioned, that will be coming up soon. And we'll make sure that Brandon sits close so that everybody can hear him. So for those of you that have been following along with us throughout the 2016-2017 school year, hopefully you've joined us for at least one of our 7 life domain activities. This webinar is the last in a series of webinars that we've done, and as always, this webinar is great for students, professionals, and supportive adults. The goals of this webinar are going to be to provide a very brief overview of the 7 life domains by the Casey Family Programs. We're going to highlight some key takeaways from our community collaboratives, our webinars, the panels from our community collaboratives, and our podcasts. We're going to explain why each domain is important, and then Brandon is going to talk with us about some recommendations from students and professionals for each life domain. Again, I just want to call your attention to your side panel where you'll see the handout section, and on there you will see that we have our Foster Care Month flyer, so definitely keep in mind any activities that you would like to join us, as May is Foster Care Month. You'll see our 7 life domains framework overview. It really just kind of provides a nice highlight of all of the 7 life domains and issues that are related to each domain. And then you'll see our document. It's titled our FSM Life Domains Key Takeaway Document. This actually provides a really nice but brief summary of all of the learning that we've gained throughout this school year, and it organizes it by life domains. So if you weren't able to join us for all of the events, you can look at this document and you can review kind of what you might have missed. So with that, I'm just going to provide a very brief overview of the 7 life domains. As many of you know, Casey Family Programs published its My Life Framework in 2006, and out of this came the idea of the 7 life domains. Western Michigan University adapted the 7 life domains framework to include education at the center. So you see this nice graphic here where we have education at the center and all of the other life domains organized around them. The Center for Fostering Success uses this as one of our frameworks across all of our programs and really sees this as a way to organize, understand, and develop a response to the complexity of the lived experience for young people with experience in foster care. So we're going to get started with the education domain because that's kind of where everything is grounded for Fostering Success Michigan. This will take us all the way back to September, where we launched the community collaboratives in September with the co-host of Northwestern Michigan University or Northwestern Michigan College, your NMC program. One of the major takeaways that we had was that all of the life domains are interconnected. Really, professionals and students agreed that the challenges that you see in education are really impacted by the challenges from the other life domains, and that success in education is really impacted by success in the other life domains. So we really feel like it's important to emphasize both and identify both the strengths and the challenges in the education domain as they're impacted and influenced by all of the other life domains. So Brandon, as our FSM ambassador, what are some of the recommendations that you have for the education domain for students?
So that, you know, clarify what you do not understand, and so that others who may be too shy to ask that question actually get that question answered for themselves as well. People tend to, just be shy to ask questions because they may feel like it's a stupid question. There really is no stupid questions. You just need to ask what you need to ask. But that's all I have to say for that.
Right. For professionals and supportive adults.
I would recommend that professionals be a point of stability for the students in their life so that they can learn, so that they just have someone that is there almost constantly. And trying to think what else that would go with that. Not assume like a parental role. I think that's an important part. But just make sure that student is getting all of the help that they need, because they may not have the help that others have and maybe that professional had. So take their own experiences with college and try and help those as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Brandon. I think it's really helpful to hear kind of the pairing of, for students, to make sure that you ask questions, and then for professionals, that they can really take a role in helping provide that stability for the students as they're making that transition through the education to career pipeline, thinking for students maybe in high school as they're maybe still going through moves in foster care, and then for students who are going into college as they are adjusting to kind of college life. The professionals and supportive adults in their life can really help them by being a point of stability, and also not assuming that the student maybe doesn't have or doesn't know about these things, but offering to share the insight that they may have to increase the knowledge that the student has in this education domain. Great. So the next domain was our finances and employment domain, and this domain took us to our central region, where we were able to work with partners in the Ingham County area and have a really vibrant conversation, really interesting panel discussion. And I would just point out to all of you, if you weren't able to tune in last October, we do have all of our panels recorded and available on Periscope. You can find us by following @FS Michigan on Periscope. And we just want to say again a thank you to Peckham for hosting us in the Lansing area. One of the key takeaways that we found from the finance and employment domain was that it's so important to really find creative solutions with students, that helping students navigate financial and employment resources is so important. Many students agreed that the potential barriers, financial barriers, are a large concern when they're considering post-secondary access and success. We heard from some students that described this as having taken a couple semesters, stopped out, and then feeling overburdened by the debt that they had when they were thinking about coming back later. We also heard students that were challenged with, kind of balancing school and work and life, and how to sort of maintain that balance to ensure that their academic success wasn't suffering for their finances and employment. This domain is a really easy domain for people to get stuck on. And so we, again, really just want to emphasize to folks that the partnership between professionals and supportive adults and students is so important here. So, Brandon, again, what are some of the recommendations that you have in the finances and employment domain?
Strong network of professionals that specialize in like financial aid and perhaps a DHHS, so that you have a point of access to resources. And then in kind of the same notion, I would work on getting, a good point of access to someone who knows a lot about banks and credit unions at a bank and or credit union, so that, you have someone you can kind of trust there. They aren't kind of giving you a runaround when it comes to, maybe if you want to get a loan of some sort or a credit card of some sort, what fees to expect or what fees to get with a bank account and all of that good stuff.
Really great recommendation, and I really like that you're talking about having somebody, both on campus for financial aid, but also having somebody in the community at a bank or credit union that you may have an account with. So what are some recommendations in the finance and employment domain for professionals and supportive adults?
I would recommend professionals to do something like a budget with students at the very least. I'm sure you can build off of something off of that, but help them create it, sit down with them, help them do it together, help them continually manage it over time. Actually really hold that student accountable. Feel like if they don't do it for themselves, but they do the budget for you, it might be a way of getting them to actually, do it. I can say from a similar instance that worked for me, I felt obligated to do something because of another professional. And I just wanted to make sure, I was holding in mind as a bargain for them because I don't want them to waste their time. So then that helped me in the long run overall.
Great, thank you so much, Brandon. So to hear you kind of recap that for students to have folks both on campus, maybe in financial aid, but also in the community at banks and credit unions, kind of being those point people to help them maybe navigate some of that financial literacy. Students finding those point people is super important. And then also for professionals, helping to build those financial skills. So building the skills of budgeting, and that while students may not necessarily understand why it's important at the time, helping them understand that having these skills is going to really support them kind of long term. So the next domain that we have is our life skills domain, and this was a really fun community collaborative that we had out at Wayne County Community College District. This was co-hosted with the Jim Casey Youth Opportunities Initiative. So we just want to say a big thank you to them for their support for this event. And the life skills domain is really complex because it kind of talks and touches on each of the other domains, but also has some specific elements within the domain itself. And one of the things that we really found that it was kind of key in any discussion that we had around life domains is that students don't know what they don't know, and that we really can't assume that a student may understand how to do something or when to use that skill, or that even a skill that you use in one area can be generalized to another area. Another thing that we really saw was that students need the opportunity not just to learn the skills, but to practice those skills over and over again. So we really encourage our professionals to take the time to notice skills that students have, name and describe those skills, and then reinforce that when you see students generalizing those skills in different areas. So Brandon, again, what are some of the recommendations in the life skills domain area for students?
I would recommend when you learn something new to actually use it. For example, I know how to make spaghetti, but my spaghetti doesn't taste that good because I don't make it as often as I should because it doesn't taste that good. So it's kind of like a vicious cycle, but one day I'll be able to make pretty good spaghetti, I hope. So, but yeah, so just you got to practice what you learn, because then you'll forget what you learned to begin with. That happens, like people talk about, they take a class that's unrelated to their major, and they never learn anything from it, quote unquote. And that's because they never apply it. And they may apply some critical thinking from it, or maybe a skill or two, but it's kind of the same thing. You gotta, when you learn something, practice it. Practice makes perfect, etc.
Awesome. So what are some of the recommendations in the life skills domain for professionals and supportive adults?
You need to do things with the students, not for the students. I've seen a lot of professionals either do things on either extreme. So it's kind of a dichotomy there. You have them do things completely for individuals, or they don't do anything at all. And you gotta find that balance. If they need to have like an application sent for like ETV, have the students sit down and do the form with you, do everything with them, and then maybe just send it, because sending it might be more of a hassle for them to do it. But do the whole process together, kind of like the budget. Do the budget with them, manage the budget with them, have them do the work in front of you. So as they're doing it, they can ask you questions, and yeah, that's about it. And anything that challenges you see among students may be transferable to other students. So something you will learn more about how to deal with doing a particular task with a student if you do it with them. So in the future, when you're helping other students, you improve. You're already a couple steps ahead of someone who's newer to doing help with students, but that's to be expected.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. I love your anecdote about spaghetti, and you will get there. One day it'll be awesome spaghetti. But it's such a great reminder that we don't just automatically know how to do things. Even something like making spaghetti, you have to work at it. You have to try it. You have to, keep trying it, even when it's not that great. Or maybe that's why Jimmy Jones is on speed dial. And, then you have to, take the learning that you have and try to keep applying it in different places. And then, I really liked what you said, for professionals and supportive adults, having students kind of not doing for, but really doing with, and having students kind of partner with you to help accomplish the goals and tasks that they need to have accomplished, and not just saying, well, I'm just going to do all of that, or here you go, you're on your own, because that doesn't really help a student feel mastery over that life skill that they're seeking to develop. So the next domain was our identity domain, and this takes us into January 2007, and we had partners from the CETA Scholars Program come and join us for another excellent panel that really kind of called on students to, I would say, be vulnerable in some really unique ways. And we just want to say a huge thank you to the Kalamazoo Community Foundation for hosting us there in their beautiful space in the middle of winter. It was nice to have a fun place to go for this community collaborative. One of the things that we saw, and we continue to talk about, is how the various identities from an individual, from personal to social to cultural to racial, ethnic, ability status, all identities are uniquely interconnected to that one person. And they're really multifaceted, and that, it's going to be different, and how a student identifies is going to be different person to person, student to student. And so, for supportive adults and professionals, really letting students guide that discussion about how they are constructing their sense of self, and not assuming or kind of jumping at, maybe an identity that you think you see in a student, and really letting the student kind of take the lead in communicating and exploring, what's important for them. And that really the identity domain is something that is constantly evolving. We see students who are continually, understanding more and more about who they are, and kind of peeling back those layers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon and ask him to share some of the recommendations he has for students in the activity domain.
I would recommend students to be themselves. That can be hard because we all have quirks that may embarrass us or something or another, but that's just who you are, and you just gotta do it up. Like we all live together on the planet, and everything's just the way it is, and there's just nothing wrong with being yourself, like, unless you're harming people. But obviously, aside from something obvious like that, just you'll be good and find people who are similar to you, and then once you find those people, you'll be able to be in a group where you're comfortable with being yourself more, and yeah.
Awesome. I think it's really helpful. It's helpful as a professional to hear you just kind of say, listen, kind of embrace your quirks, be yourself. We all need to be reminded of that. But I think for students that might be out there listening, hearing you, seeing all that you've accomplished, and knowing that you're also kind of like, hey, everybody's got quirks, kind of helps to normalize those things. So thanks for sharing that. What are some of the recommendations that you have for professionals and supportive adults in this domain?
I would encourage professionals to get students out on their campus and get out and join clubs, make friends, participate in things, so that they get out of their comfort zone and they begin to form an identity. And it's probably better that they get engaged on campus things, just because those are the type of people who students should be around generally. Just because if they're very focused on their education and their community, they're doing good things, and then that's just going to help the student have good influences and build their professional background. And then for things outside of that, like just their maybe ethnic background or cultural background, inquire to students what they know about it and see what isn't available in the community for them to build upon that, so that they can have a better understanding. Like if they're an indigenous person, have them see what they know about that and see if they are able to connect with their tribe, or find a powwow nearby and be able to connect to those roots, because they may not know about those things are available, and they may be afraid to seek out those things.
Thanks, Brandon. Again, just really great recommendations, and I think reinforcing the education piece is awesome. And so, kind of reinforcing that it's really important for students to stay involved, to get involved on campus, for them to, find a community that is really going to support them on campus and really support their academic studies as well as their personal development, and that there are also plenty of things within the community that can help to reinforce that. So I really appreciate your thoughts for this domain. Before we go to the next domain, I do just want to give a plug. Carrie is listening. She's taking questions. If you have any questions, you can use the questions feature. Carrie will write those questions down, and we will take questions at the end. So no need to hold the questions that you have. If you have some that are coming up as we're talking for Brandon or myself, we would love to hear. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to answer those questions at the end. All right. So our next domain is the supportive relationships and community connections domain. This domain brought us back to the Lansing area to partner with the Fostering Stars program at Lansing Community College. It was a really great opportunity for us to talk about healthy connections and really kind of the broader supportive relationships that are so necessary for young people with experience in foster care as they're making their way to and through the education to career pipeline. One of the major takeaways that we had were the importance of healthy connections as as being instrumental in promoting a sense of well-being and belonging for students. This kind of relates to what Brandon said a little bit about students finding peer groups on campus and getting engaged on campus in different activities. But the sense of belonging, we really see as a really critical part of students kind of developing in all areas, but also really feeling a strong sense of interconnectedness to the people around them. You know, we all know that we need community support, and that we need people who we can feel like they have our back and they can help us, you know, pick ourselves up when we fall, or you know, walk alongside us when we're struggling. So taking risks to make connections really is the key to success. So again, Brandon, what are some recommendations that you have for students in this domain?
I just want, again, kind of like the education domain. I think that was the one we were talking about. Don't be afraid to ask things. Make sure to ask for plenty of help. You know, you can, being in foster care sometimes, it's unintended, but you kind of come dependent on things, and you just expect things to happen. And then it comes to a point where, sure, you can get things that are very helpful because of your situation, but there's a new step that wasn't there before, and that's just really just asking for the help. So being able to recognize that, you know, things are still there for you. Things aren't gone, you know, as you're starting to age out. You just got to ask. And there's just a little more to it than, you know, as you were younger and in high school, where things were just kind of done for you because that's just the way the expectations of someone at that age wouldn't facilitate having them doing so many things that we would expect them at the college level. So just to understand that the new step coming into college is taking new steps forward and asking.
Awesome. You know, asking for help is something that we always talk about. We probably talk about maybe ad nauseum, but I think it's worth repeating. So thank you for bringing that up again. What are some of the recommendations that you have for professionals and supportive adults in this domain?
I would highly recommend professionals keeping up to date on resources as new ones come out, or current ones are edited, so that to make sure eligibility doesn't change for your students, or if students are going to get more or less, so the student can anticipate that change as soon as you're aware, to make them aware. So say with ETV, say ETV decreased in funding, and the student didn't know that over the summer. They went home and they come back and they had this expectation they're going to get what they're supposed to get, and they didn't, and then that really puts a lot of stress on them. They just got back to college. They have all these other things going on. Now they have less money than they expected. Now they have to make adjustments. Something like that is something you probably really want to avoid at all costs. That's a headache for the student, yourself, and hopefully isn't detrimental, but I could see in some cases where that would keep a student from having to move forward for a period of time. The other thing I would know is make a network of professionals that you know of who are points of contact for other resources in the community and across the state, so that, you know, you're not going to be able to specialize in knowing everything. So you got to have other people there for you, because, you know, you can only do so much. So making sure that you are able to connect with them to connect with you, so that you're good to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You know, I think one of the fun parts that we had with the community collaborative, I mean, they were all fun, but we were able to create a document and have an activity where people were able to find other, you know, resource partners, collaborators in the different domains, and then they were able to take that back with them, and hopefully they're, you know, if you attended, you've been able to use that to identify other experts, because I think what Brandon said at the end there about how, you know, you don't have to know everything, but knowing people who maybe know or are experts in other areas is really critical and key. And the example that Brandon gave of, you know, if there's changes like something within ETV, you know, if you're not connected with staff with ETV, then, you know, you might not get the announcements about that. You may not hear about that. And so you really want to make sure that you're connected with people who are directly overseeing some of the really critical resources for our students. The next domain was the housing domain. And, all of the domains presented really unique challenges. I would say the housing domain and the community collaborative that we held at Eastern Michigan University, co-hosted by the MAGIC program, was a domain where, there were a lot of challenges that seemed to kind of have issues far beyond maybe our reach as, community or even statewide programs. Issues that really stemmed from some of the federal policies, some of the state policies. And there was a great conversation that we had about opportunities for advocacy. There was also really great conversations. And I think one of the most important things that we heard from students was how important professionals can be in walking through with a student some of the nuances of understanding their housing rights and responsibilities, and understanding that for a student that's sitting down to sign a lease for the first time, they likely have never looked at a lease. They may not understand what all of those things mean, what they're committed to, and that as a supportive adult or professional, you play a really critical role in ensuring that a student is very clear on what those expectations and responsibilities are. And so with that, I would love to hear from Brandon what his recommendations in the housing domain are for students.
I would recommend, personally, finding roommates that you hardly know, maybe that you don't know, rather that you hardly know, because it's a lot harder moving into someone that maybe you're close with, or maybe just a good friend but not super close with. So there's a lot more room for abuse and expectations that shouldn't be there. And in my experience, I've had 3 roommates in college. So I've always just had 2 bedrooms, and I became a friend with them over time. And the initial boundaries we had are still there, because that was just the way it is. We didn't know each other, so we were only so comfortable, and so that just became the norm. And then eventually we just opened up and became a lot better friends. My roommate right now, love the guy, he's great. Sad he has to move out. But I've had a very good experience with that. Anecdotally, I've seen it just not work very well when people who know each other move in together, just because there's, like I said before, just room for abuse. So that's pretty much all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point. When housing is really critical for lots of reasons, but it's really important to get a good night's sleep. It's really important to feel safe, and it's really important to feel respected in the place where you live, right? And so having healthy boundaries with your roommates is a huge part of ensuring that all of that happens. If you have a roommate who is up all hours of the night and you're trying to sleep and make it, to class on time, it's not going to work out very well. So what are some of your recommendations in the housing domain for professionals and supportive adults?
I would very much advocate for changes in just any policy that has room to be molded. I was starting to think of another word, but I can't think it, so I can't sound as fancy. Anyways, if you can just make it easier for foster youth to get housing, it would just probably make the world for them, because it's just so expensive, and they're usually coming from our background where they are their own financial support. For lack of a better word, a lot of normal people who go to college usually have at least, hopefully, some parents to fall back on. Obviously, that's not always true, but foster youth most of the time do not have that support financially. Just really making sure that it is easier and more affordable to get housing, because it's just as Western, at least, it's just as expensive as tuition, really. So.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brandon. I think, sometimes when we talk about the cost of attendance in college, we forget that tuition is just one part of it. It's usually about half of it, tuition and books, but the full cost of attendance, does include housing, does include the, groceries and paying the bills and keeping the lights on and all of that stuff. And so there's a lot of opportunity that we have to advocate. And, there's other really great models that are happening that we're seeing across the country, where in some states they're having certified independent living on college campuses so that students can use their independent living stipends there. We have things where the states are allowing students to be at the head of the line for year-round housing, for the lowest cost housing on campus. I'm really just trying to make it possible so that this cost of housing doesn't become a deterrent to students when they're looking at going to college. And for many students, I know that it really can be. Our last domain is our physical and mental health domain. And this last community collaborative took us to Saginaw Valley State University, where we were co-hosted with the FAST program at Saginaw Valley State and Delta College. It was a really excellent last community collaborative with students who, really kind of highlighted and shared some important things for us to keep in mind when we think about physical and mental health. We were also able to have a really great webinar that highlighted one of our partners at Ozone House and the collaboration that Ozone House now has with Washtenaw Community College and Eastern Michigan University. In all of the different areas that we, sort of had to discuss physical and mental health, one of the really main features and themes that came out was that the stigma around mental health is still quite strong. And then that stigma alone, the stigma that students have when they are experiencing a mental health issue, or considering seeking support for a mental health issue, that stigma really causes significant challenges in accessing the support and the services that they really need. One of the other kind of dynamics that we were able to talk a lot about at the Community Collaborative was that physical and mental health are very closely intertwined, and that it's really important to encourage healthy physical activities and lifestyles and well-being to help promote mental health well-being as well, right? And so, they're kind of, it's a chicken and the egg. Sometimes you have a mental health issue because your physical health is poor. Sometimes your physical health is poor because you're having a mental health issue. It just seems like in all of the discussions and all of the opportunities that we had to talk about this domain, that people more often found that they were supported to improve their physical health than they were their mental health, and yet both areas are equally as important to address. And so with that, this is going to be our last domain. So if you have questions, please, don't forget to send your questions in. We're taking those down. We really want to make sure that we hear from you. But with that, I would love to hear, Brandon, what your thoughts are about recommendations for students.
I think the most important thing is having a support system, because you can't do everything by yourself. We're all interdependent people. In general, some people are more interdependent than others. There's really no wrong or right way of how interdependent you are. It just depends on circumstance and what's going on in your life and stuff like that. I think in doing that, it touches back on like the community relationships domain, and identity, like being yourself, finding who you identify with, being around those people, then learning what levels of vulnerability you should open up to over time and with who, because of professional and personal boundaries, and just knowing how to develop that system is really just a can't think of the word or the phrase. Just a touch and go approach, maybe. I don't know if that makes sense. But just doing it as, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. It's different for everyone because everyone has different levels of comfortability. So it's a wait and see approach. That's what I'm saying. So there's no cut and dry way of doing it. So you'll just figure it out. But always side on caution. Don't be overly vulnerable with people, because then that's when there was room for abuse in that relationship, or yeah, there's really room for abuse, and that's what I would err the side of worrying about and being safe.
Mhm. So, what I hear you saying is that you, while you encourage students to develop that, a support system, find people, who can come around them, that students also need to keep in mind, how much they want to open up their life to other people, and to really let those relationships kind of grow naturally, rather than maybe sharing everything with everybody that you meet. And then really waiting to see, if that person really is a true friend to you, if that person really does, follow through. Do they say what they're going to? Do they hold your trust? Do they keep your confidence? And I think that those are really important things, and those are part of, kind of like you said, the trial and error of finding a strong support network. But it really is so important to both physical and mental health. So what are some of the recommendations that you have for professionals and supportive adults in this domain?
I think professionals need to keep in mind that mental health for foster youth does not always mean that they need therapy, or that you need to, pry. The only times where I would recommend really prying is if there's any signs of self-harm, suicidal tendencies, or any considerations of something like that, or if they're going to harm others. So you got to be always on the lookout for that and address that immediately. But in my opinion, I think it's something where it's another wait and see approach. No, it's probably best for you to deal with, for youth to deal with their mental health as they see fit, because it's just a journey. And the only time where an intervention needs to be done is if you're preventing something catastrophic from happening. So just, keep an eye on your youth, make sure they're okay. If something is getting to a point where you want to address it, I feel like when, but I would just recommend they do that experience themselves, because sending someone to therapy who doesn't want it, they need to want to change anything that is going on, type of thing. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say for them.
Awesome. I really appreciate your comments on that, because I think we heard from so many students who talked about experiences when they were younger where they were forced to go to therapy, and that those experiences of being forced to go to therapy were really negative and kind of had some detrimental impacts on them. And, that I think for professionals, we all have, great intentions, of course, but, we want to make sure, like you said, that if a student is going to change, they have to want to change. They have to want to engage in making that change happen, and that it has to be the right kind of intervention if there's going to be any intervention at all. And of course, Brandon, as a good up-and-coming VSW, named all the right things when you need to maybe interject in an intervention. And I think just for all of us being reminded that just because a student has been in foster care, it doesn't mean that they have mental health issues. It doesn't mean that they have a mental health diagnosis. And so not to assume that they may be struggling just because they have a history in foster care. So thank you for that. So again, I just want to say thank you to all of our partners who were out there, who helped us make this year great. We were really excited to kind of launch this 7 Life Domains effort and really help kind of make the 7 Life Domains framework that we have been using from the beginning more relevant, more vibrant, more accessible to the FSM network, our students, our professionals, our supportive adults. So thank you to everybody who hosted a community collaborative. It was wonderful to go across the state and meet with all of you, and to everybody who came out and joined us and asked good questions, and to all of our audience, online who helped to support sending their questions in on Periscope, Twitter, and Facebook Live. It was just a really great interactive year, and I think we learned a lot. As I said, the key takeaways and recommendations document is available in the control panel for this webinar. It will also be available on our fosteringsuccessmichigan.com library. We will be providing a community collaborative directory, and the summary will be released at the end of May. And next year, we will be doing our FSM Community Collaboratives again throughout the 2017-2018 school year. We will be going throughout the state again, this time partnering with DHHS offices throughout the state in each region. We hope that you all come out. We hope that you bring new partners, bring new professionals, share this with your students. We would love to have more students at these events to help give their perspective and also to help join in the learning. So just want to say thank you again to everybody who made this year of Community Collaboratives great, and that we look forward to seeing you all next year at our Community Collaboratives. In just a few minutes, we are going to take time to answer some questions, so please make sure that you get your questions in. But before we do that, I wanted to give us some time really quick with Brandon here to talk about the Student Union. And so just a very brief thing before I let Brandon give some highlights of what's to come. Every year, Fostering Success Michigan has had a student leadership activity that we have spent the year working with students from across the state, our students from campus support programs across the state. In years past, we've had a student advisory board to the FSM Summit. Last year, we did a leadership summit that engaged students from across the state. We've had our video that was a huge success, focusing on I am and really helping to share the different identities of students. And we have done a leadership retreat in Washington, D.C. This year, we threw about, a few ideas in the air and kind of, talked about what might be helpful. And the idea for the Student Union really came directly from the group of students that we had working with us. And Brandon is here representing that group today, but I do want to give a shout out to Mercy from the MSU FAME program, to Justin from the Western Michigan University CETA Scholars Program, and Alicia from the Ferris State University FYI program. They, along with Brandon and along with our graduate assistant, Jarrell Amos, worked really closely throughout this year to craft this document that's going to be available this summer, and that this was really kind of their vision much further than we actually expected it to go, which was great. And it's always one of those awesome surprises that students have. So I am going to turn it over to Brandon to just share a little bit about what you will find and what's to come with the Student Union.
Student Union, we should have it done, I want to say June or July. It is was originally going to be a newsletter, as you kind of see in the slide. It's called a newsletter and has a date. But after Maddy had seen how comprehensive we went with it, we decided that it was best to just create a college guide for each life domain. So in each domain, we talk about why it's important, what resources are available in that domain, what students can do, and some tips, and then like a quick excerpt from who wrote that domain, because we delegated the work. So like I gave the two domains I did at the end, I wrote a quick little tip story about something about me and how it pertains to that, so that, gives a little bit of character to it instead of just being cut and dry, a little bit of resources and what you should do. You need to study, you need to go to class, blah, 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 blah. Stuff that just give a character, so it's unique rather than just a thing that tells you what to do and what is there. So I can't think of anything else I'd want to say about it. That's pretty much it, So
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Brandon. We're super excited to release it to you all. Like Brandon said, it gives a flavor of all 4 of the students that worked on it. It really kind of highlights, it goes beyond just the facts, and it really highlights sort of a personal approach. It's really meant to be a guide to college for students from foster care by students from foster care. And that it's broad enough that we hope that it speaks to a variety of post-secondary experiences, understanding that, not every student is going to a 4-year institution. Some students are going to be going to a community college. Some students may be going to a technical school, trade school, and that wherever you are going to post-secondary education, this guide will have something for you. It will speak to you. And most importantly, it is written by peers. And I think that that's the part that makes this guide really special. So we're looking forward to that. We're looking forward to hearing what you all have to say about that. And there will probably be some things in the next school year that will help to kind of build off the student union. But definitely continue to look for that. Continue to look for blogs on the FSM website on our stories page, and continue to look for Brandon's thoughts in our monthly FSM newsletter. So our last thing before we go, you see the screen here, just reminding you that May is Foster Care Awareness Month. We do want to make sure that we see all of you wonderful people out there who work so hard to support our students with experience in foster care at one of these events. We have a mixer on the mall. It'll be an opportunity to kind of a pre-rally for our foster care awareness walk on May 20th. We have a special swag item if you come and join us that day. Like I mentioned, we're going to have our foster care awareness walk. You'll be able to sign up for that through links on our website. And then we're going to have a special webinar with Dr. John DeGarmo next week. That's going to be on Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m., so it's a little bit later. For many of you who know Dr. John, he's a national expert in foster care and supporting young people who age out of foster care. Of course, if you miss an activity, we'll have lots of highlights on our website, in our newsletters, and on our social media. So my last question for Brandon, one question before we go, is with all of the life domains and all the different things that we've done this year, is there one life domain that really stands out to you as kind of your most important life domain, the one that you feel like you spend the most time working on, or that you sort of set your biggest goals in?
I would say education, because I don't know. I don't really, for me, I'm very aware. So I'm always kind of taking care of business on my domain. I'm really actively thinking about the framework, but always really focused on school, which leads me to do all the things I need to in the surrounding domains to make sure school is going good. I'd say second one, outside of that, education, I feel like should be everyone's number one, would be like physical and mental health. I had a lot going on this past school year. It was probably the biggest challenge I've ever went through in my life, to be honest. I had probably the hardest 2 semesters I've ever had as well. I got a 3.8 both of them though, so I don't know how that happened, but it happened. I made it happen. But it was really just trying to make time for myself when I could, to just relax and forget about school, forget about work, and then been trying to get in the gym more, want to be active more, especially now it's summer, which is a lot easier to be active in summer because A, we have more energy, because that's just a fact when the sun's out more, and B, I want to be outside and do all that kind of stuff because I really enjoy being outside. So really focused on those 2 in the past year.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate your perspective on the life domains. And, I think for all of us, we're always attending to these life domains, but the way that you drew your experience with mental health or the physical and mental health domain into your work toward, succeeding in education, I think is really helpful for people to understand, like you said, this has been one of the most challenging school years, and yet as somebody who has seen you pretty much every week throughout the school year, I can say that you have done a fantastic job with your activities here at FSM. You've been a regular contributor for a variety of things, and I think your work with the Student Union speaks for that, and definitely your grades speak for that. So I will take one opportunity to see if there's any questions, and it looks like we don't. So, and except for just a few shout outs to Brandon, who has done an awesome job. And so, of course, we want to just say thank you so much to Brandon for being our guest today, joining us for our very last webinar of the school year. And to all of you who are out there listening, thank you so much for continuing to stay with us, and look for more throughout the rest of this month with Foster Care Awareness Month. And then don't forget to join us again in September when we start back up with another round of the 7 Life Domains series. Take care and have a great afternoon, everybody.